Let's go for the first question. We'll kind of roll from there, and you can keep adding questions, and we'll get to as many as we can here. Question one, since missions failed, did Spain/Mexico just want to coexist while the Anglos want them out? Well, did Spain/Mexico just want to coexist? I'm not quite sure if we're asking, do they want to coexist with the Native American groups?
Yes, with the natives, if they want to just coexist, because once the Anglos come in, it says that they just want them out of the way. So
gotcha. Thank you, Roberta. No, they were hoping the Comanches would allow them to coexist. Like the Spanish perspective is we're the dominant group, or we're the better group is the best way to put it. And the Indians should be like us. They should be Spaniards. Which is what the missions were intended, but they just finally realized that, like, practically speaking, that was not going to work. So they were making the best of a bad situation by bribing the Comanches and the Apaches and a lot of different groups to not attack them. It was a way to not make things worse for them and kind of tread water. They don't know, of course, yet that the Anglos will be coming in the 1820s. But the main goal for the Spanish when they give up the missions is just, let's find something that works even a little bit. And they're really acknowledging that they're not the major military power in the region when that happens, right? Second question, why was Moses Austin allowed to bring in Anglos? Oh, that's a good one. We're going to talk about that next week when Dr. Andres Tejerina, who's a fantastic scholar, he's going to talk about the Tejanos in Texas. And then the week after that, we're talking with Dr. Greg Cantrell, who's going to talk about the Anglos coming in. But the short version is, this is the situation as I described it. Things are falling apart. Moses Austin shows up and says, hey, you guys need people who are not Comanches? I've got 300 families I can bring in. And the leaders in San Antonio, they don't think that's a good idea. They think it's the least bad idea they have available, right? So this isn't their first choice. It's just the least bad option they have, because it's either that or get conquered essentially by the Comanches and give up the territory. That's how they see it at that point. Next question. What role did the Napoleonic Wars play in the degradation of the Spanish Empire? Well, that's a great question. And the short version is Napoleon kind of sucked all the energy out of a lot of European powers, including Spanish. And so, you know, there's all these wars constantly going on the continent, as it was called, in Europe, that takes a lot of attention and time, and you know, Napoleon takes over Spain, right? And that becomes an issue for the Spanish Empire for a while. But it also changes things in the New World because Napoleon needs money for his wars, which is why he ends up selling Louisiana to the United States, even though he had actually promised the Spanish he wouldn't do that. He goes and does it. And so, you know, what's happening in Europe, what I like about this question, and I think it's good to show our students this, is that nothing that happens in Texas happens by itself. It's connected to these big, broad systems. And so what happens in Europe is what is affecting what's happening in Texas, because it's affecting what's happening in New Spain. Next question. Of the 1,500 rebels killed at Medina, how many were captured and executed by Arredondo? That's a good question. I don't know how many survived the battle and were promptly executed, but Arredondo was a no quarter kind of dude. If you're interested in Arredondo and in this battle, there's a fantastic book called Arredondo. It's a biography of him by a guy named Brad Folsom. And I think it's the best book that's been done on the topic. And it really gives you an insight into Arredondo, his campaign in Texas. A lot of you, I'm sure, know Santa Anna was one of his lieutenants during this trip. So this is Santa Anna's first trip to Texas, where he learns, hey, this is how you put down a rebellion. You kill everybody. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head about how many were executed after the fighting itself by Arredondo, but he was happy to kill pretty much everybody he got his hands on. How he got to be called the Butcher. How many citizens in San Antonio, La Bahia, Nacogdoches would suffer the same fate? So I think this is about Arredondo. Arredondo executed about 321 people in San Antonio itself. And then his cavalrymen killed 70 people at the Brazos River, no, the Colorado, and then a couple hundred more in scattered shots out from there. And so it's hard to get exact numbers because Arredondo's soldiers did not provide very good after action reports. But he killed 300 or so in San Antonio, and then many dozens out from there. And then you combine that with the people he killed at the Battle of Medina, and it's pretty rough stuff. Question 6: didn't the De Leon family flee to Louisiana following the revolution? So the question is, did the De Leon family flee to Louisiana following the Texas Revolution? Actually, we're going to get to the De Leon family next week, or not next week. We're coming back on November 9th. So I don't want to get too far ahead, but I love this question because there's a lot of families that do leave Texas and go to Louisiana during the 18 teens, and they hide in Louisiana a long time. They don't come back, a lot of them, until the Mexican period. When Mexico becomes independent of Spain, there's an amnesty that allows a lot of these families to come back. And so if you ever heard of Francisco Ruiz, he's one of two guys who signs with his nephew, Antonio Navarro. He's one of two guys that signs the Texas Declaration of Independence in 1836. He goes to Louisiana in the 18 teens to escape Arredondo, and he comes back. He had a lot of experience with Americans as a result in Louisiana. So there's a lot of Tejanos who get a lot of exposure to the United States in Louisiana as a result of being pushed out of Texas itself. Okay, we got a lot more questions, but I'll just answer one more because I want to have time to go look at the documents. But feel free to email me. You guys, I hope, have my email. If you don't, it's just andrew.torget@unt.edu. I'll put it in the chat in a little bit. But you can email me any questions you ever have, and I'd be delighted to talk to you about any aspect of any of this history. Not just my talk, but anything we covered in the whole webinar. Let's see. So the next question was, how did Spain react? Was the Spanish government critical of Arredondo's reaction? Well, Brad Folsom's book actually talks about that pretty explicitly, but the answer is basically no. He was promoted. Arredondo was promoted after this, and he became the commander of not just Texas, but kind of the whole northeastern region. And so he gets a plum position where he's based in Monterrey, in Nuevo Leon, and he's rewarded because he reclaimed the region. They didn't care how bloody it was. This is an era in which that was considered the norm and how you did this sort of thing. So there was no outcry amongst Spanish authorities about Arredondo. He was considered to have done a great job and was rewarded as such with a really plum position. So anyways, let's see here. So I'm gonna stop right there. And then we'll come back to some of this